Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating trap we all fall into, navigating the incredibly complex moral dilemmas of modern life. We'll be pulling insights from Thomas Alethia's comprehensive guide, 12 Steps to a Good Life, to explore what he calls the hero's journey. Basically, it's about how we figure out what's truly right or wrong when the world around us just seems to be constantly shifting. So get ready, because we're going to challenge some of your fundamental assumptions right out of the gate.
So, is right and wrong just an opinion? It's a totally provocative question, isn't it? I mean, think about it. If someone genuinely believes something is morally okay, does that make it okay for them? We live in this highly diverse society, right? We're constantly exposed to completely different worldviews, cultures, and personal beliefs. And it's so easy to look at this landscape and just conclude that morality is simply a matter of personal preference. But as you'll see, that mindset actually sets a really dangerous philosophical trap. Okay, let's dive right into this with Section 1, the Moral Relativism Trap, a philosophical thinking error.
Let's define exactly what this trap is. Moral relativism is the false argument that there's no absolute standard of morality, and that what is deemed right or wrong depends entirely on individual beliefs or cultural norms. Now notice the word false there. Aletheia explicitly identifies this not just as a difference of opinion, but as a distinct philosophical thinking error. When we adopt moral relativism, we're essentially saying that objective truth just doesn't exist in the realm of ethics. And hey, while that might sound super open-minded at first glance, it actually creates a terribly shaky foundation for building a good life.
And this brilliantly illustrates how it shows up in everyday life. Think about it. You might hold a firm belief that lying is wrong, absolutely wrong, but your friend justifies it depending on the situation. Or you might feel a deep moral duty to help others, while your neighbor believes the only real moral duty is individual success. Or what about a classmate who thinks cheating is perfectly acceptable if the pressure is just high enough? If moral relativism is true, we literally have no grounds to say any of these actions are actually harmful. We'd be forced to just shrug and say, well, that's their truth.
Moving into Section 2, navigating the gray areas and the danger of anything goes.
Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens when we try to navigate these ethical gray areas with an anything goes mentality. We end up experiencing massive cognitive dissonance. It's this deep internal tension because our actions and beliefs just don't align with reality. To really grasp why this happens, let's break truth down into 3 types. First, we have objective truth. This is reality that exists whether you believe in it or not. Like, if you walk into a closed glass door, you're going to bump your head, totally regardless of your opinion on the door. Second is subjective truth, which is your personal interpretation of events. And third, constructed truth, meaning the shared beliefs of a specific culture. The thinking error of moral relativism happens precisely when we confuse our subjective or constructed truths with objective truth. That confusion is the root cause of so much of our internal conflict.
There's a really vital difference we need to establish here. True empathy means understanding someone else's subjective truth and their perspective. That is a virtue, and we absolutely can and should strive for that. But the error of relativism happens when we use that understanding as a crutch to excuse harmful behavior. You can completely respect that someone grew up with different constructed truths without conceding for a second that their harmful actions are morally acceptable. So the takeaway here is that empathy does not require you to abandon objective reality. Let's just pause for a second and ask ourselves this Socratic question. If right and wrong are just opinions, how do we actually define harm? Think about it. If everything is entirely relative, someone could easily justify withholding basic human needs from others simply by claiming it aligns with their cultural norms or personal beliefs. Without some kind of baseline, the whole concept of harm becomes completely meaningless. We need an anchor. Which brings us to Section 3, the human needs anchor. Natural ethics as an objective baseline.
To escape this trap, the author shifts our perspective to a remarkably grounded, practical solution. It's an objective baseline based on actual human needs. Aletheia calls this natural ethics, and the rule is beautifully simple. As biological and social organisms, human beings have real, specific needs, right? From food and shelter to belonging and love. Actions that fill human needs are good for all persons. Actions that withhold those needs are detrimental or harmful to all persons. It cuts right through all that subjective noise. By using this basic rule alongside some good old-fashioned common sense, you can make highly sensible decisions about what's right and wrong, completely regardless of someone else's personal opinion. To make this even more practical, whenever you find yourself stuck in one of those ethical gray areas, just run through this simple self-check. Ask yourself, am I motivated by ego right now? Like pride, or a need to control the situation? Does this action do the greatest good for everyone involved? Would anyone find it unfair, hurtful, or unpleasant? Is this something I absolutely wouldn't want done to me? And simply, does it make the world a better place? If you answer these honestly, you'll find the gray area usually clears up very, very quickly.
Of course, knowing the right thing and actually doing it in the heat of the moment, those are two entirely different things. And that's exactly why Athea introduces this brilliant mental tool called RADAR. It stands for reflect, describe, respond. First, reflect. Just notice your thoughts, your emotions, even your physical sensations in the moment. Second, describe. State the facts of what you're experiencing internally, but do it without judging yourself. And finally, respond. Choose an intentional action based on those core ethical values we just discussed. Radar is awesome because it gives you the power to just pause so you can choose your response rather than just reacting on emotional autopilot.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into tolerance without compromise, balancing empathy and core values.
So how do we actually apply this framework out there in the real world? The crucial point here is understanding the stark difference between genuine tolerance and a relational thinking error. Things like people-pleasing and guilt-based morality happen when you're making decisions based on this constant fear of disapproval, or when you change your opinions just to keep the peace. That's a thinking error driven by fear, not ethics. The healthy alternative is setting clear boundaries. True ethics means clearly defining what behavior is acceptable to you and actively protecting your well-being, even if it causes a little bit of friction along the way. And this brings us right to the core takeaway of this explainer. Thomas Aletheia hits the nail on the head here. He advises us to acknowledge that morality is rarely clear-cut. Be tolerant, but do not compromise your own values. That is just so powerful. You can absolutely respect the deeply personal experiences that shape someone else's beliefs. You can be deeply compassionate, but you literally do not have to abandon objective reality or your own ethical baseline to do so.
So, to wrap things up, I want to leave you with this final, lingering question to really reflect on. Where do you draw the line between understanding another person's view and compromising your own soul? Navigating life's gray areas doesn't mean pretending the gray doesn't exist. It just means having a reliable compass to guide you through it. Take some time to think about your own boundaries, your own core values, and how you can practice true tolerance without ever losing yourself. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.